use cases of Web3 through DePIN. This episode of the DePIN Hub podcast is brought to you by Nodi, the new Node as a Service product by DePIN Hub. We've seen that 2025 is the opportunities of the node sales. There's a lot of projects with great opportunities, but to run a node is quite complicated. You need to understand Linux, technical terminology, servers, virtual servers, VPNs, VPS, a lot of complexities that you don't want to have to handle. And even if you do, you want to be able to sleep at night knowing that other people are taking care of that for you, right? Leave this work for the nerds. We guarantee that you're going to have the best service possible and all your nodes are going to be generating passive income for you every day without you having to do any work. So go to deepinhub.io/nodes. And that page, you're going to know everything that's happening in our Node as a Service product. And make sure to subscribe to the newsletter because there you're going to know everything that's happening, all the promotions, all the sales, all the great opportunities to make 2025 a great year for us all. Hello everyone, Daniel from DePIN Hub here. Today we're interviewing Nahid Masad, Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of Karrier One. Karrier One is disrupting the telecommunications industry by building a decentralized, user-owned global wireless network. Their mission is to democratize connectivity, making mobile and internet services more accessible and affordable around the world. I think I've been following this project for, a couple years. We met like 2 years ago in Singapore during the Real World event by IoTex. And it's been very interesting to see the progress and how things are growing. And also how, the whole DePIN ecosystem has been evolving because you guys are like very OGs in the space and have been like building for a long time, right? Well, thanks so much for joining the podcast. Maybe let's start by you introducing yourself, your background, and your role at Karrier One.
Yeah, I appreciate you for having us on, man. My name is Nahid Masad, co-founder, chief strategy officer at Karrier One, background in computer science, and been involved in the project since late 2021. Pretty much just all things based on the crypto and token side are what I handle. Also, a lot of like the go-to-market and overseeing a lot of like the marketing and just making sure that like all those angles are aligned. So that's pretty much my role at Karrier One.
Nice. Can you tell a little bit about the story behind Karrier One? How did it get started? Why did it get started? What is the vision and in the telco industry and more?
Yeah, so a lot of the team is based out of Canada, and over here, ours is kind of like a little bit more of a monopoly than you see over in North America. So you have like 3 big telecom companies just kind of running everything. So our co-founder, one of our co-founders and CEO, he's been big in the telecom space for the last 25 years, been building networks globally, and mainly across Canada, and has one of the biggest CLECs. And I think it was just a lot of like the timing and things going on. Like right before that, we had the big outage from like Rogers, and I think with crypto evolving and DePIN becoming more viable and technology increasing, it just became more of a realistic goal to be able to build a telecom network with how the world has evolved, right? So I think all that came together, just like frustrations and advancements in technologies to kind of like form together a project, right? So just like trying to compete against all the telcos all at once, it's kind of impossible, right? It would have been just like trying to compete against the taxi monopoly that they used to have in New York or any other places in the world. But you take it with like decentralization or like kind of like power of the people, and now you have all that much more power to be able to compete against these like large oligopolies or monopolies and whatnot, right?
Yeah, I know exactly. Can you explain what happened in Canada? I wasn't aware of like there was like a disruption of the service. I think I remember it was like a few years ago.
Yeah, it was during it was actually like right before the time Karrier One kind of was created. It was, I think, 2021. There was a big outage across Canada. So like one of the 2 major telecom operators, Rogers at the time, just kind of like went down across the world, and even 911 wasn't working, right? And it was, so it was like really 2 or 3 days, but it was also just the fact that we were reliant on like 2 companies. One went down, even the 911 wasn't working when apparently that should still work when it goes down. So just kind of was a big deal across Canada. I think it made global headlines as well.
Yeah, I know exactly. Because I remember vaguely something like that. And yeah, it's scary, right? Because we rely so much on electricity, energy, and telecommunication, internet. if you remove that from us right now, I feel that we're like, I'm gonna go hunt my dinner or something, because really removes everything that we know as like society feels like, right?
No, no, for sure. It was crazy, trust me.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then you guys decided to build Carrier One as being like a decentralized like telco infrastructure. What's the difference between you and the leading market players in Canada and in the world, and like how does the DePIN take part of your project?
It depends how you ask that question. I guess if you're asking us like what's different between us or DFIN, or are you asking like what's us difference between us or the traditional telecom companies, or are you asking both?
I think both, yes.
So yeah, with us and the traditional telecom companies, I would say that it's not so much an issue of but I'd say what makes us really different is we're not really like trying to compete against the telecom operators. We're more so just trying to build a network that anyone can use, including the telecom operators. So we kind of like supplement their network as well, right? So one of the things that one of the last things we're looking to do is come in there and try to compete with these like multi-billion-dollar corporations. And when you're dealing with these like industries, they're very brutal, right? So you have to kind of like find a way in there to, I guess, like add value to their network so that you can actually grow and become something bigger, right? So with a lot of like the way the telecom industry is growing, with like kind of like radios becoming a lot smaller and being more on densification, it's become more of like a logistical nightmare and a capex nightmare for these telecom operators, right? So um, we're actually bringing value to their network, right? We provide cheaper access to like internet or wireless offloading and all that. So it's something that will actually be able to eventually grow the network into something where all telecom operators will be able to use it and benefit from it, and makes it a lot easier for like other operators or players to enter into the market. In terms of like DePIN projects, I'd say one of the things is we're more focused on actual global connectivity, not just wireless. I think right now it comes off a lot as just wireless and telecom, but even with our roadmap and a lot of things that we're working on, they kind of just expand. And when I say connectivity, I'd say like, for example, we're working on things like Scion with SWE and Miston Labs, so helping set up a science data center over here in Canada and being the first one in Canada to set it up. Working with like Walrus protocol on SWE, which would be for like decentralized data storage. I know we were looking into like connectivity solutions for like decentralized VPNs as well and all that. So right now it seems like it's just wireless, but we have a whole range of like connectivity solutions that I think help us, one, differentiate from the other wireless projects, and then two, helps us build out more value to our actual like network token or utility token, right?
So you guys are basically building like an infrastructure play, not just like infrastructure in one angle, but actually infrastructure of infrastructure. Let's say like data centers. If you're doing like Walrus with like the data storage and other things as well, it's not just wireless. That's quite interesting. You guys are building on SWI, I suppose. Then.
Yeah, so sweet blockchain, and honestly, they've been uh, amazing in terms of like the growth we've seen last year, and just like the support the Sweet Foundation and Mission Labs provides, and I think it's going to be a even bigger blockchain in 2025.
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty bullish on SWI as well. I think it's definitely a good one to keep an eye on. There's like Chirp. That's like this like IoT platform that's building on top of them as well. Walrus, I think, is going to be massive. I've seen like I was looking into building one server, and then just the requirements are like ridiculous. Like the amount of data they can be able to support is going to be you kind of need to have like a data center for that. How does the blockchain then like work in terms of Carrier One? Because how does like this token is going to be used to help build the network?
Well, there's a few different use cases, obviously, right? Like one, having like an actual like token makes facilitating payments or even incentivizing payments a lot easier than having to deal with like multiple different like fiat currencies globally around the world. So I'd say that's one of the main things, but it's also a governance token, so it gives anyone the ability to like participate in building out the network through governance and earning tokens from that. So I think if you're to try and do this with an actual fiat currencies all around the world, it would either be extremely or a lot more difficult or not even possible. But I think with like using a token, one of the things we've seen with tokens and blockchain technology and these networks is like a token's a really good tool to incentivize building out these networks in a very secure way, but very quickly. So when you look at Bitcoin and how much that network grew in the last 15 years, just by being incentivized with the token, or how you're able to build out these networks that are worth like billions or even Bitcoin trillions of dollars, and how fast they were built. It's like that was all only possible through a token, right? So it's the same methodology. You can use a token to build out these billion-dollar telecom networks now, just by having that token incentivize the whole payment of the network, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw the growth with Helium IoT, right? That they managed to deploy the total like 1 million devices. That was pretty like hot in 2020, 2021. That was like I think the epiphany moment that people realized, okay, this can actually become big, and not just for IoT, but for other things, for like any kind of infrastructure. And I think kind of like now we're here 4 years later, full time building DePIN projects and trying to build some sort of infrastructure, and learning from like their mistakes, I would guess, and then always learning how to improve and keep improving. I saw that you guys have also the carrier number system, KNS. How does that integrate Web3, and what is it?
At the base of it, I won't take up like a bunch of time going into it because it can go a lot more. Is it's really like being able to like bridge over telecom numbers, which I think everyone in the world is used to or kind of forced to having a telephone number onto Web3 and being able to link it to a wallet. So I think there's a few uh things about it. Like one, when you look at it, like I said, there's around 5 billion people around the world that have a phone number or a cell phone and a telecom and whatnot. But with Web3, we only have around 100 million. So a phone number being like that universal identifier is a really good tool to like bridge the traditional Web2 users onto like Web3. And even when you look at like different blockchains and whatnot, is for example, you go and somebody's on Solana and they have Hotspotty.Solana, right? But then now you go on ETH and they have like Hotspotty2 at .ETH, right? And then you go on Sui and they'll have Hotspotty3.Sui or even Hotspotty.Sui, right? So it's like you have all these different handles between different blockchains and whatnot, and you can't really link that .Solana address to other addresses. But when you have that unique identifier, which is your phone number, now you can also start to link it to like multiple chains and then just share that one address for multiple chains or that one phone number for multiple chains. And when you look and you see, for example, like with Zelle and what they did with like phone numbers and payments in the US, you kind of take that to the next level and increase it to like blockchain, and you have something that's like now a really big tool and can kind of build on it too by releasing like an API and an SDK. Like I said, it can expand to a bunch of stuff like SIM swap protection as well, which is a big thing with crypto people, or just having that secondary phone number as a verification tool and whatnot that you link away from your traditional phone number, right?
So it's kind of like it's a phone number 2.0, I would say, right? It's like an improved version that's more secure. It's such a pain in the ass, man. Like you change cities, you change countries, you get a new phone number, then you need to figure out, okay, am I gonna keep paying? I'm gonna stop, and what happens if something important comes to that number? It's the portability happens between carriers on the same country, but if you're moving country, that's very complicated, right?
And these numbers are globally because we have all these global roaming agreements. So just like you said, it's a really good tool that if you're constantly moving and having to get phone numbers, that could be your phone number that you keep for like all your accounts and verifications and whatnot. So you don't need to worry about always having to update that information as well, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, like I know people like, oh, I have a Portuguese number. I go to Asia, and then I need a 2FA, which is pretty bad. But a lot of places in Portugal does the banks and verification codes through SMS, and you're in a different country, you don't get that code, you can't pay your bills. It's a whole mess that can definitely avoid. So I think it's I love to have that for sure, right?
And I'm excited. We got a lot of features rolling out for it this year. Hopefully, gonna get the full open beta launched in the next few weeks. So we'll definitely hook you up with the number as well.
Nice. Yeah, I'll definitely want one and start using it. How does then Carrier One helps like allow more people to get into the community? Because I was checking, you have like indigenous communities of Canada, rural regions that can be onboarded to like internet and the telco world by using Carrier One, where places that sometimes the big carriers don't have a financial incentive to deploy.
Yeah, so especially with like rural and indigenous communities, I think a big issue we see is like back to like the carriers and capex being a big thing and densification becoming a big thing now is that like carriers aren't really incentivized as much to go and install these like their equipment in these areas like rural or indigenous communities because the return on it is nowhere near as installing it in really like populated cities or suburbs. So a lot of the time these areas are like underserved and they're kept with like older equipment and a lot slower connectivity. But the thing is, a lot of these areas are willing to pay to have better connectivity, but they've just never had the ability to actually pay for it in the past, right? Nowadays, there's like solutions like what Carrier One's doing, where we're actually giving them the ability to pay for that equipment. So it's like similar to like me being at home and I get the standard Wi-Fi router from my internet provider, but it's kind of crap and it doesn't even reach all the way to the house. So I go and I buy like a $200 or $300 router that I connect to the one they gave me, and I use that one instead of the base Wi-Fi, right? Because I'm willing to pay that $300 to make sure the Wi-Fi is always good and strong in my house. It's similar with like these different types of communities. Like these communities are willing to pay for it. They've just never been the option. So like now giving them the option and platform to be able to do that, a lot of them are willing to do that, and we've kind of seen that across Canada, right?
Yeah, and then how do you see the expansion outside of Canada going forward?
Good. I think we got some big plans for like the US, and like I said, we already have like over 40 roaming agreements globally. So I think with us the main thing is the US is just a very good market to launch your product at. So that's why we're kind of like a little bit more focused initially on North America, just because Canada is also our home country, so we kind of know how to maneuver it a little bit better. But um, even then, at the end of the day, we're just a global play too, right? So hoping to kind of grow that network on a global scale, similar to how like Uber or anyone else did it with in the past, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Uber like started in like a few cities in the U.S., then the whole country, and then now they're in the whole world. It's not an easy task, right? I can imagine, but I'm sure you guys gonna get there.
Yeah, I think we'll see. Like I said, I think DePIN is going to be one of those spaces that we'll definitely continue to see growth over the next few years with equipment getting better and cheaper and technology getting better and cheaper. So yeah.
And then let's say, how does the company generate revenue, and how does that revenue goes back to the community they are deploying the devices?
Yeah, so when it comes to the devices and generating revenue, like I said at first, that comes down to like working with other telecom operators to like offload their data onto our network. So, and it comes down to like those roaming agreements that I keep bringing up. So, roaming agreements are more on the wireless side with like the 4G, 5G radios, and then you have like the wireless offloading agreements, which go with like the Wi-Fi hotspots. So, it's just really about signing as many of those agreements as possible with carriers around the world so that like when those carriers phones come into contact with our hardware, those phones will be set to use our hardware, and then we get paid for that usage from the carriers on the back end, and then whatever money that we generate on the back end goes back into the token and being redistributed to people across the network. So that's kind of how you build the flywheel effect. And then as the network grows and we go to eventually offer like certain like mobile services and subscriptions and all that type of stuff, that network will flow back into the network as well and keep pushing the value of the token. And then also same thing goes with like as we launch out new connectivity or DePIN devices, those will have different ways to monetize and bring value back to the network, right?
Yeah, and exactly the classic like a DePIN flywheel that just keep on growing as more and more people start using. What kind of devices do you have? Like, because I know like a telco tower, you can have like a small Wi-Fi router that can be, a smaller amount of like smaller radius, and then you have like a very expensive tower that costs a lot of money. But then,
Like right now, we have like kind of like the Wi-Fi hotspots that we're going to be launching, and those are more on like kind of like driven by like community deployment or like any individual being able to like purchase and install it and participate in building and owning a part of the network. And then you have like the more expensive 4G, 5G equipment. And then that comes to like a more boutique solution where we work with a few different vendors, whether it's like Blink, Nokia, Airspan, or even what's it called? Parallel Wireless. It really depends on those. It becomes like more of like a boutique solution where we got to find out like where those radios are being installed and kind of like working with the deployers to find the proper radio with like the proper spectrum that they can install it and actually have the radio like working and generating revenue, right? So those are our two main products right now. But like I said, we're gonna be off like rolling out more solutions like bare bone or bare metal servers for sweet validators using like Scion or even other validators from different chains. We'll be able to offer them like Scion solutions and then also like decentralized storage solutions with Walrus. So offering those types of nodes, and then just other DePIN and connectivity devices that we're looking at expanding to and offering as the project grows.
yeah, no, that's really exciting. I think this idea of like the multiple infrastructure play, it's very interesting and definitely a need, right? Because some projects is like usually validators is quite hard to deploy, not necessarily only just technical part, also finding the hardware, right? Like for example, if you do like a Solana validator, you need to have like a very beefy machine. I can imagine for Sui as well or Walrus, you need like I think it was like 50 terabyte disk to get started, you know.
The Walrus was definitely a little bit on the more expensive side, or even like both the Sui validator and whatnot. And I think for us, that's the main thing. I think with the Sui validator, our unique selling point is connecting it through Scion, which is like a next generation like network infrastructure play that Sui's kind of like really pushing and kind of like how the internet should have been. And then with Walrus, like yeah, it's just kind of like finding that next level. And trust me, even they kind of like lowered the initial requirements. They were even using a little bit higher quality hard drives. I'm not even 100% sure what the standard was because I didn't do it, but they lowered it initially, and eventually the network will even go up and become more expensive hardware. But it's exciting to see.
Like a 50 terabyte NVMe disks or something like that, like really fast.
That was at the NVMe, and I think at first they were forcing that, but I think they actually lowered it so that you don't need NVMe right now, just because those are a little bit newer and harder to find. So it was becoming harder to outsource it, but eventually they're going to be pushing those again, just to be in like the standard storage on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because like nowadays, I think you find easily 8 terabyte disks, so you need to combine a bunch of disks, right? Like you can buy to make it worth it, and it's very yeah, it's not that cheap. I think comparing to like a SATA drive or like even SSD disks. Let's go back in time then. Can you give like a quick TLDR of everything that happened until now? And how do you see Carrier On going for like the 2025 and the next 5 years?
Yeah, so everything leading up to now, we were in pretty heavy development for the last year and a half, especially in our specific subsection of DePIN. We've kind of seen it like evolve and change so much in the last 2 years. So like kind of like one thing we didn't want to do is just rush to launch a device like we saw with like a lot of other projects doing and not really having a way to actually monetize or bring usage to the network. So that was definitely one thing that we were working on the last couple of years, just to a lot of like proof of concepts and trying to figure out like what's the best strategy that like we're not just kind of like pushing a device on an end user and the return is cents worth of tokens and the return on investment is like over 100 years or not even really there. And then also a lot of development in terms of like the carrier number system and just kind of like designing that and building it out. Because one big thing we really wanted to focus on is kind of like the flywheel and making sure that like it doesn't just break right away. And we figured you have to have like some sort of like software solution or that's global that anyone can participate in. So that's kind of where KNS and having a global way for people to kind of like adopt the network came in and building that out. And now we're really just kind of gearing up to actually like roll out all these products in our token and whatnot, right? So we just started rolling out like KNS at the end of last year. We just kind of like announced like the Wi-Fi's at the end of last year as well and getting ready to ship those out. We have our TD that we're planning for like end of April, beginning of May. And then we have all these different like kind of like solutions that we have rolling out throughout the year. So like kind of like simultaneously or async with like the Wi-Fi and the KNS. We also have like those data server or data center solutions that we've been like working on and building out and whatnot. So I think for the last year and a half or close to 2 years, it was like a lot of like R&D and development and just building out or trying to design the network the best way possible. And now we're kind of like at that point where we're really ready to like start like kind of like focus on pushing it out and marketing and growing the community and the project and trying to see where it goes. And I think in the next 5 years, we're gonna see, like I said, a lot of like growth and maturing in the DePIN space. And I think with us, we'll hopefully see some exponential growth over the next 5 years and become like one of those big projects that are comparable in size to like some of the other big crypto projects that we see that are all multi-billion-dollar market caps now and all that, right?
Yeah, no, it's makes a lot of sense. Like you guys are really focused on building because it's freaking hard, right? Like building like a DePIN project in the telco world with the hardware. There's like so many levels, so many things that you need to focus on. It's clearly a good thing to like forget about, like the noise and really focus on building. And I see that now you guys are ready to start putting some fire in the community and some like really getting the excitement out. Especially, I think 2025. Hopefully, we want to have a very exciting year in the crypto industry, especially in DePIN. There's a lot of people talking about, like it's just a space that's growing. We see more and more projects getting to this infrastructure. But I think telco is a big moat in a way, right? Because it's such a complicated world to get in. It takes a lot of work. It's not just like building like a small DePIN storage project that or something that's quite straightforward. It's actually you're disrupting one of the main the main infrastructure of the world. It's like telco. Then there's also energy. There's a few projects doing that.
The energy one's an interesting one too that I think in the next few years we'll see it really maturing and whatnot.
Exactly. All right. If you want to tell our community where they can know about Karrier One to follow up with all the things that are happening, getting excited about what's coming up this year and then in the future, where should they go? What would you like to tell them?
Yeah, so I'd say keep up with like our main socials, which would be Twitter and Discord if they want to keep up with the project. Specifically Twitter, I think is where we post all our news and big announcements and all that. And then Discord if they're looking for like more just like live or instant messaging and all that. But I think like I said just right before this is I think we have a lot planned for 2025. I think with our TG coming up, you're gonna see Karrier One at a lot more like events and conferences and a lot more push on the marketing side of things. And we have the store rolling out in the next couple weeks where people will be able to actually purchase the Wi-Fi devices on top of the first 300 Wi-Fi devices being shipped out. So I think there's a lot of things to be excited for. And I'd say just keep up with the Twitter and follow, and you'll see in the next few months really start to pick up.
Yeah, and make sure to also check deepinhub.io. We have the project, the Karrier One there. All the information, all the links, and also this podcast episode is going to be hosted in there as well. Thanks so much for the interview, Nahid. It was like super interesting to see. Actually, I'm very excited to have another podcast maybe in a year from now to see all the progress that you guys did and see how it goes, because 2025 hopefully is going to be an amazing year. And for everyone who's listening at home or in the car, anywhere, make sure to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, doesn't matter, everywhere, because there's going to be a lot of very interesting founders that we're going to be interviewing and bringing DePIN to the masses, because that's our goal. Well, thanks so much, and have a great week.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And definitely gotta do this again in a year, or even like towards the end of the year or after our token launch. We'll definitely get on here again and get it going.
Let's go. Have a good one.
Perfect. Take it easy, man.